I decided to go through my wife's phone one night, even though we have the perfect marriage, and now I wish I never did. Hey everyone, I'm here to share a story that's been weighing heavily on my heart. I know I'm not the only one who's ever faced a crisis in a seemingly perfect relationship, but I hope that by sharing my experience, I can find some clarity and perhaps offer a lesson to others. So, let me start from the beginning. My wife, Diane, and I had what I thought was the perfect marriage. We met in college, bonded over our love for travel and food, and after a few years of dating, we tied the knot. We complemented each other so well. She was a spontaneous one, always dragging me on weekend adventures, while I was the planner, making sure we had everything organized. We laughed together, supported each other, and shared dreams of starting a family one day. About 2 months ago, Diane came home one evening, practically glowing with excitement. She told me she got a promotion at work. I was thrilled for her. She had been working hard, often staying late, and I knew how much she wanted this. We celebrated with a nice dinner and a bottle of wine, and I felt like we were on top of the world. Our life was comfortable, and we were saving up for our dream house. Everything seemed perfect. Fast forward to a couple of weeks later. One night, I woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly. I groggily glanced over and saw a string of notifications. My curiosity got the better of me, and in a moment of weakness, I decided to unlock her phone. I know. Trust is paramount in a relationship, and I violated that trust. But I was just so curious about what was keeping her up at night. What I found shattered everything I thought I knew. Scrolling through her messages, I stumbled upon conversations that left me breathless. Sarah was selling pictures of herself online. At first, I thought it was some sort of misunderstanding, but the more I read, the clearer it became. She had been doing this for months, and the money she was making was substantial. I felt sick to my stomach. I remember sitting there, heart racing, trying to process the information. My mind was flooded with questions. Why hadn't she told me? Did she really need the money? Was our life not as comfortable as she had led me to believe? The worst part was realizing that she had lied to me, and I felt an overwhelming wave of betrayal wash over me. The next morning, I confronted her. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to know the truth. I asked her about the messages, my voice shaking with disbelief. She looked at me, her eyes wide with shock, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it. But then she broke down. She told me that she felt empowered by her choices, that it was her body and her decision, and that she never intended to hurt me. Hearing her explain it made me feel even more conflicted. On one hand, I understood her perspective. She was an adult making her own choices. But on the other hand, I felt like I had been living a lie. She had hidden this part of her life from me, and it felt like a betrayal of the trust we had built over the years. We spent hours talking, tears flowing freely. I wanted to understand her motivations. She mentioned that the money had helped us live comfortably, pay off debts, and even save for our future. But I couldn't shake the feeling that our life was built on something I couldn't accept. I loved her, but I felt like I was losing a part of myself in this situation. In the days that followed, I wrestled with my emotions. I took time to reflect on our relationship. I thought about all the good times we had shared and the dreams we had built together. But I also felt a growing resentment towards the secret she had kept from me. I couldn't help but wonder if I had been naive to think that our marriage was as perfect as I believed. Eventually, I made a decision. I needed space to think, to figure out what I truly wanted. I moved into a friend's place for a week. During that time, I reflected on our marriage and what it meant to me. I talked to friends, sought their advice, and even considered the possibility of therapy. After a week of soul-searching, I returned home. Diane was waiting for me, her eyes filled with hope and fear. We sat down and had another long conversation. I told her that I loved her, but I couldn't ignore the fact that she had deceived me. We both cried as we spoke about our fears and hopes for the future. In the end, we decided to give ourselves time to heal and rebuild trust. We agreed to go to couples therapy together. It's been a journey, and we're still working through the aftermath of this revelation. We've had tough conversations about boundaries, trust, and what our relationship means to each of us. I can't say where we'll end up, but I'm hopeful. I've learned that love isn't always perfect, and sometimes it takes a crisis to truly understand what you want and need from a partner. Thanks for reading, everyone. If you've been through something similar, I'd love to hear your stories and advice. On to the next story. My wife put a tracker on my car, and it led me to a shocking discovery. So, a little background. My wife, Sarah, and I have been married for about 5 years. We met in college and hit it off right away. We shared so many interests, from hiking to binge-watching terrible reality TV. Our relationship was built on trust and love, or so I thought. Recently, though, things started to feel a bit off. Sarah became increasingly paranoid about my whereabouts. At first, I chalked it up to her having a rough week at work. She's a nurse, and the stress can be overwhelming. I tried to be understanding, but then it escalated. She started asking me where I was going, who I was with, and why I was taking longer than usual to get home. One day, I noticed something strange. I'd gotten into my car and felt a little bump underneath the dashboard. I shrugged it off at first, but it nagged at me. A few days later, I decided to investigate. I pulled out my phone, Googled how to locate a tracking device, and lo and behold, I found it, a small, inconspicuous tracker glued to the underside of my car's dashboard. I was shocked. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal. How could she do this to me? I confronted her that night. I walked into the living room, tracker in hand, and said, "Sarah, we need to talk." She looked at me wide-eyed, and I could see the panic in her expression. "Is that what I think it is?" she stammered. "Why did you put a tracking device on my car?" I asked, my voice steady but my heart racing. She tried to explain herself, saying she was just being cautious. "I've heard stories, and I didn't want to get hurt," she said, her voice shaky. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. After a long, tense conversation, she finally admitted that she had been feeling insecure in our relationship. She thought I was cheating because she had been unfaithful in the past, a secret she had kept from me. I was blindsided. The woman I loved, who I thought I knew inside and out, had been hiding this dark part of herself from me. The next few days were a blur. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I couldn't believe that the woman I trusted had betrayed me in such a profound way. I needed space to process everything, so I stayed at my brother's place for a few nights. During that time, I reflected on our relationship. I remembered the little things, the late-night texts, the sudden changes in her behavior, the way she would get defensive if I asked about her phone. It all started to make sense in a way I wish it hadn't. I realized that her obsession with my fidelity was a projection of her guilt. She was afraid I would do to her what she had done to me. When I finally returned home, we had a long, emotional conversation. Sarah apologized profusely, tears streaming down her face as she recounted her own mistakes. She told me about a one-night stand she had during a rough patch in our marriage. She claimed it was a moment of weakness, a desperate attempt to feel something she thought we had lost. I was heartbroken. I felt betrayed, not just by her actions, but by the fact that she had felt so alone in our marriage that she sought comfort outside of it. We talked for hours, and in the end, I had to make a choice. I could either walk away or try to rebuild what we had. After a lot of soul-searching, I chose to stay. I loved her, and I believed that we could work through this together. We've since gone to couples therapy, and it's been a long road, but we're slowly finding our way back to each other. The tracker is gone, and we've both committed to being more open about our feelings. It's not easy, and there are days when the shadows of betrayal creep back in, but we're learning to communicate in ways we never did before. What did you think of these stories? Let me know your thoughts about them in the comments, and thanks for listening.